In this futuristic spaceship, a whole community flies through time beyond space to the end of the universe. Voyage to the end of the universe is not only dangerous adventure. Exotic food is the daily menu. That is, for most space travelers. And the design for social intercourse, shocking as it may seem, is enjoyed by both sexes.
Emergency, emergency. This is automatic central control.
We're getting closer. If I'm right about it, we're in great danger.
We're not talking about actors. We mean a real monster.
I brought her back. She'll live and I'll get her another body.
I know they're going to catch me, but don't let anyone see me like that. Please, Doctor, help me.
Biologically speaking, it's of primary importance that man should want to mate. Hey, that's...
You don't get all your kicks from surfing, do you?
We want to be free to ride our machines without being hassled by the man. And we want to get loaded.
You think you're going to make a slave of the world? I'll see you in hell first!
The American International Podcast.
Are you ready?
Hey there, welcome to the American International Podcast. I'm Cheryl Lightfoot.
And I'm Jeff Markin.
And you can consider this your ticket to a voyage to the end of the universe from 1964.
Voyage to the End of the Universe was directed by Jack Pollack, from a screenplay by Pavel Juráček and Jack Pollack, based on Oblok Magellana, the Magellanic Cloud by Stanislaw, and produced by Rudolph Wohl.
And the credits that I'm about to read are the Americanized credits, also the Americanized character names. It stars Dennis Stevens as the captain, Rodney Lucas as Commander Byron MacDonald, Dana Meredith as Charlotte the sociologist, Irene Kova as Bridget, Francis Smolin as Anthony Thompson, Otto Lack as Coordinator Michael, Jerry Tullis as Pilot Eric Svensson.
Also appearing are Myron March as Bernard, Rudolph Dial as Pilot Irvin Harold, John Maris as Mark, Martin Tappan as Biologist Peter Hubert, Marcella Martin as Mark's wife Stephanie, Joseph Adams as Coordinator Lawrence, and John Rose as the ship's doctor.
The film begins with a spaceship whooshing by. In space, everyone can hear you travel. We see a man with some kind of skin damage. He's screaming at us to turn back. Everyone's going to be killed. Then we see that same man lurching through the corridors of an expansive spaceship.
And the camera continues wandering through the ship's narrow hallways as the credits are displayed.
Over some very atonal music. We hear a voice talking to Michael over an intercom. It's the voice of a man saying, "Michael, we can't turn back." And now we see the interior of the ship. It's a really cool design. There's lit up panels, sort of geometric patterns on them. And we start watching the captain and other crew members observing Michael, the mad one, on a monitor.
One of the crew members wants to try to reason with Michael. We will later find out that this crew member is Byron MacDonald. The captain tells Byron that if he's not successful, they're all doomed. Then the captain himself tries to contact Michael over a camera/intercom system. But Michael is not in the mood for conversation. He shoots the camera with his ray beam gun.
Oh, well, they tried. The captain monologues via voiceover that they were the first of their galaxy in space, the first to seek life on the green planet. This is something that generations of children will be taught on their world. And now we're fully in the flashback.
Yep, we're back at the beginning of the mission. The ship is the Icarus, and it's preparing for takeoff. Crew members are strapped to their chairs as a voice over the intercom lets them know of their current conditions.
And then the countdown begins. When it gets to 0, the ship separates from the station and takes off, passing yet another station as it heads off into the vast expanse of space.
Their mission? To travel to a planet with conditions much like their home planet and search for signs of life.
And they're kind of looking at their own planet in the rearview mirror as they go. The ship proceeds for a while. We will note the passing of time through various vignettes that allow us to mark this passage. So while the ship is traveling, we hear a klaxon sound, and the computer announces that automatic control has been suspended. The crew seems relieved to get up and move around here.
Charlotte, the ship's sociologist, and Mark have a conversation about Mark's wife, Stephanie. She's on the ship as well and seems to have had a rough time with the liftoff.
Yeah, she's a little shook. But Mark brags that he wasn't scared at all.
Then another crewman, Coordinator Lawrence, notifies Commander Byron MacDonald, who we saw in our flash forward, that he is receiving a transmission from MacDonald's wife, Rena.
MacDonald goes to the view screen to talk to Rena. He's going on about a rock he took from their garden for a memento, but Rena seems to be very melancholy. They're going to be separated for 15 years in her time, but only about a year and a half in his time due to the theory of relativity. So when he returns, she's going to be a lot older than him.
And not only that, but she's currently pregnant. So when he returns, he will also suddenly have a teenager to deal with.
She believes it's going to be a daughter.
The transmission cuts out, but Lawrence quickly restores the transmission. Byron says that he was worried that they wouldn't have the chance to say goodbye. And Rena says that if his daughter had been born, he'd be seeing her now, too.
Byron asks if Rena's sure the baby will be a girl, and she is. And she says that when he returns, Byron will have to teach her how to dance. Rena asks Byron if he's glad he's on this mission. Byron says he's glad, but he really wishes Rena was there. And then Rena kind of snipes that at least he has Stephanie for company and asks Byron to give her regards to this same Stephanie. Uh-oh. She says goodbye, Byron, and he says he loves her, but she doesn't return that sentiment. And then her image kaleidoscopes away.
And now lunch is being served.
Such as it is.
The captain is joking about someone ordering sautéed bananas. Most of the crew members seem to be eating salads, but one of the crewmen, pilot Eric Svensson, who I assume was the one who tried ordering the sautéed bananas, just received a disc.
In a loaf pan. It looks ridiculous.
He eats it and says it's an improvement over the regular food they're served.
And now it's time for a little entertainment. We hear a robot speaking. He's giving the meteor shower forecast. There is a chance of them, and the crew members start to make fun of this robot. The captain asks, does it give any fortunes? But then science officer Anthony Thompson comes to its defense.
Anthony Thompson has brought this robot along as his support animal. The captain asks why he brought this robot along anyway, because robots usually have tasks, and this one seems to be just for companionship and entertainment. And Anthony says that in all the 60 years that he's been flying, he's never flown without this robot.
As Thompson is repairing the robot's motherboard, it's stuck in some sort of feedback loop, he tells the assembled crowd that his robot Merlin, for that's his name, can do anything. If you can get him to work, snarks Eric. Thompson looks offended and tries to get his wayward robot to follow him as he storms out. And everyone laughs as it turns in the opposite direction.
Lawrence notices a dark-haired female crew member that's caught his attention, so he asks the captain what he might know about her, but the captain doesn't know much.
Just that she's an expert in space metals, whatever that means. The captain wants to know why Lawrence is asking, and he says no particular reason.
So next, Lawrence goes to the biologist, Peter Hubert, to ask if he can grow a flower that he can give her. A simple dandelion will do. And the captain comes by and asks what's all this talk about flowers, and Lawrence says it's nothing, and the captain apologizes for even asking.
Now we're in the gym.
It's spa day.
Yay. I think every day is spa day on this ship. Eric is wearing a teeny little bathing suit, and some of the guys are going on about his modulator. I don't really get the joke, but the other guys seem to be razzing Eric. And then, just to prove that time has passed, Peter the biologist comes in to tell Lawrence, as he climbs into the shower with him, that he managed to grow a flower. They're not naked, everyone's still in their bikini bottoms, but it still looks rather cozy.
Peter asks if he's going to go ahead with his plan to give the flowers to the brunette. Certainly is pretty, he says. The girl? No, the sunflower. So next we see Lawrence walking down the corridor toward the brunette's quarters with a sunflower in his hand. The bridge crew is watching through the monitoring system and wondering if he'll have the courage to go through with this. Someone suggests that the captain give him some help, so the captain communicates into the woman's quarters, her name is Ava, that she has a visitor outside her door.
Then she goes to answer the door. Lawrence gives Ava her flower, and he asks if she has time to chat. Ava invites him in. The crew of voyeurs laments that the monitors don't go into the room, they're just in the corridors.
But maybe they'll fix that before the next trip.
Bunch of pervs. Now sociologist Charlotte's going into Anthony Thompson's chambers to fuss over him. He's quite old. He's crankily saying that he took his vitamins already, but Charlotte calls him on it. Anthony appeals to Michael, who vouches for him, but Nina gives him his vitamin drink anyways, saying that it won't kill him. Charlotte goes to look in a viewscope, which is trained on their home planet, and while she's not paying attention, Anthony takes his vitamin brew and holds it down towards the floor where his little dog comes to lap it up. I guess he's not getting any vitamins today.
Now we're in a kind of a lounge. It's an unwinding area for the crew, and we see Lawrence and Ava watching space soaps.
Some kind of daytime drama about a woman who's trying to keep her man from flying off into space. Very apt for the situation.
There are a few other crew members about, And Bridget comes in and is offered kind of a smoke from Peter.
It's not really a smoke, it's an inhaler, like those Vicks inhalers that you would sniff to open up your nasal passages that I think they have banned by now. It's almost a precursor to a vape pen, or the space equivalent of a cigarette.
Bridget asks Peter what he thinks everyone is doing back home, and Peter reminds her that time is different here. It's almost suspended, he says, but they would probably be celebrating the new year right now. And she wishes she were back home with her husband.
Instead, they're flying towards the green planet, as we're constantly reminded. Bridget asks the captain, who's playing 2D chess with Anthony, why the people of the green planet never try to contact them. The captain says it's too far away. They're 16 light years from this planet. But Peter chimes in that it won't take that long for them to get there at the speed they're traveling. They have the superior technology.
In another part of the ship, Michael is looking out the window.
Space window.
And Eric comes in and catches him looking at the green planet. He says he often does this himself, wondering if the plant life is like that on their own planet, and if the inhabitants will be like them and will welcome them with open arms.
Michael says, yeah, if they even have arms.
Eric finds this thought amusing, then asks if he knew that Bernard has brought a piano on the trip. Apparently, Bernard belongs to a classical music club and is hoping to learn some new Green Planet tunes.
At this, Michael absolutely loses it. He screams that everyone's acting like they're on a pleasure cruise, always talking of nothing. At this rate, their mission will fail. Eric says that they're just trying to pass the time. Michael calms down a little bit and apologizes. He's just tired of seeing the same faces every day. We all are, Eric reminds him, and anyone with a job can relate to that sentiment. Imagine living with everyone you work with all the time. Eric says the further we go out of our galaxy, the greater the danger, and the worse our nerves will become. And Michael hangs his head in shame, I guess.
Next we see the captain has called a meeting. In attendance are Byron MacDonald and Charlotte and Anthony Thompson. The situation is this. Stephanie has a baby coming, and they only just learned about this.
Well, I think the captain knew because he said he's avoided telling everybody, but he can't do that anymore. Charlotte calculates that Stephanie probably got pregnant about 3 to 4 weeks before they took off.
Byron is a little miffed to hear this because his wife was rejected for this mission because she was pregnant. Anthony says that Irene wasn't rejected for that reason, but rather because she was too afraid to make the trip.
Charlotte says that this baby will make history. It's the first to be born in space, but it will be a very hazardous experiment. And then Charlotte says, at least Stephanie is 10 years younger than Rena, Commander MacDonald's wife.
Because of that, Stephanie said you'll have a better chance.
Over in the conservatory, Bernard is trying to teach Eric to play piano. He's not great yet.
He's playing scales, and Bernard complains that this trip is really starting to drag.
So he wanders off to the gym. It's a little more deserted than the last time we saw it. Bernard asks where everyone is, and then Charlotte arrives looking for Peter, who's not there.
Few are there, actually. People are barely using the gym these days. Bernard suggests she calls him on the intercom, but Charlotte says that she prefers the exercise. Besides, tomorrow Thompson will be 83.
And I guess we cut to tomorrow immediately because everyone's all gussied up. Ava's wearing a gown, much like you might see in the 60s on Earth, and she runs to Bridget's room. They check each other's fit. Eva wonders if Lawrence will like her dress. Bridget winks at her. She thinks he will.
Now everyone is hanging out in the lounge for this party. People are dancing to kind of a depressing dirge. It sounds like a funeral march.
The captain's trying to talk to Merlin, but the robot starts babbling again, and Thompson goes to fix him. Stephanie dances with Mark. She's fine for now.
We see that Michael isn't participating in the party. He's in the corridor, looking in.
Also looking in is Commander MacDonald, who's not even there. He's watching on a view screen, looking very grim. But he's not watching everybody on that monitor. He's just watching Stephanie. And in his head, he hears his wife's voice going on about Stephanie and how their daughter will be grown and she'll be old, old, old when he returns. And as he sits there, he starts playing with his pet rock. That's not a euphemism.
Back at the party, Anthony Thompson has to sit out this next dance. He doesn't have the energy to keep going. And this next song is a little more bouncy. The dancing, however, is even more awkward looking.
It's almost like the dances from the 1800s, if you ever watched like Pride and Prejudice or something, where all the moves are coordinated, the partners mirror each other, they're paired off, but the movements themselves are very strange with a lot of bending and twisting and
head tilts,
and it's odd, but it's kind of funny. And the men all seem to be dressed like Colonel Sanders, white frock coat with a black bolo tie.
The two crewmen who earlier decided to sit out the dances go to Charlotte, since she's the sociologist. because they want to ask her if she thinks that Bridget's making fun of them. Bridget didn't want to dance before, but now she's out there cutting a rug.
Charlotte says no. Bridget's just devoted to her husband back home. I mean, we heard her say so. It doesn't really look that way, though, when we watch her get very flirty with the guy that she is dancing with. Satisfied, the two men go find Bernard and start vaping.
Suddenly, an alarm goes off, and the music stops, and everyone runs to their stations.
An object has been spotted outside the ship.
Anthony Thompson suspects it's a comet or a meteor, probably from the orbit of the green planet. The captain asks him what he needs. Anthony says he needs time.
Later, Thompson analyzes the makeup of the object. It's not a meteor. He gives the dimensions and says that it weighs 36,000 tons.
They are able to pull it up on the viewer, and it's not a comet. It appears to be a space station.
The readings indicate there's organic matter on board, and the crew start to try to figure out what it is. To Eva, it looks very primitive, but one of the other crew members wonders if perhaps their ship would look primitive to another, more advanced civilization.
They try sending a transmission and greeting, but get no response. Michael poses that if there are human beings aboard the ship, they may be afraid to answer, and Byron agrees this is a possibility.
The captain wants to send an expedition to the ship. Michael says that that's what robots are for, dude. But the captain thinks that the primitive inhabitants of the ship might freak out when they see robots, and Charlotte agrees. Robots just aren't suitable for these kinds of jobs.
So the captain decides to send two men over instead, and Peter and Irvin drew the small straws. They suit up and are preparing for their launch over to this other ship.
Bernard wants to go, but he's just the piano man. Eric coordinates the mission from the Icarus. A tiny little flying saucer takes off from the ship and delivers Peter and Irvin to the derelict ship. On the way, the crew is still trying to hail the derelict ship, but there's no response.
The captain gives Peter and Irvin permission to attempt a landing. They dock, and they board the mysterious ship.
And then the flying saucer returns back to the Icarus for some reason.
So in exploring this ship, Peter and Irvin find that there are human beings aboard, about a dozen, and all dead. They also find gambling devices. There are dice on the floor, and deduce that this must have been a pleasure cruise ship of some sort.
They also reckon that everyone on the ship died at the same time. One of the dead men is wearing some kind of dog tag, and the ship's crew scan it, revealing the ship's name as the Tornado. The computer scans its memory banks for information on the tornado, but there's no mention of it in the last 700 years of history available in the database. So, knowing nothing, the crew on the Icarus say that Peter and Irvin should proceed with extreme caution.
Peter and Irvin see a light source, so this ship may still have power.
This worries MacDonald, who's watching. Power on for that long indicates atomic fission on board. Uh-oh.
Making their way to the bridge, Peter and Irvin find the captain still sitting in his chair, and they say he looks to have died peacefully despite the gun sitting beside him.
Well, apparently there was some violence on board.
As they reach the engine room, they come to believe that this may not have been a friendly cruise ship after all. Peter puts his foot through a hole in the floor, and in trying to shake himself free, triggers something.
Yeah, his boots are magnetized, obviously, because there's no gravity. So that keeps them from floating up to the sky, I guess. But it's also served as a trap for Peter, who's now stuck. Irvin's trying to help him get free, and the crew on the Icarus tells them to get the heck off the ship now. The captain signals Eric to send the rocket back for them, and he does.
They stop to grab some documents, but the captain tells them they haven't got time for that.
And he's right, because at that moment, the tornado explodes. It's a huge fireball that everyone on the Icarus can see. The crew looks very grim. Well, not the little dog, but everyone else does.
Next, we see the captain walking down one of the ship's corridors with a guilty conscience.
Yeah, he's second-guessing his decision to not send that annoying robot instead of Peter and Irvin to the wreckage of the ship.
His voiceover says, Byron was right. I should have sent robots. All they found was an ancient ship still bearing its cargo of death.
Dun, dun, dun. Byron goes to chase after the captain, but thinks better of interrupting his misery.
Despite the tragedy, the mission must continue. The captain has ordered Eric and Michael to install the spare rocket, which must be done on the Icarus's exterior.
The job went fine. They weren't even out there that long. It was only a 12-and-a-half-minute job. But the captain says that no one suspected that this was the moment where everything started to go wrong. Mortal danger entered the ship with their return. Eric tells the Icarus crew that the robots will finish the job. I guess they learned their lesson.
Now we're with Anthony Thompson, and he's discussing similarities between the green planet and their own. They both orbit a sun, and the atmospheres are markedly similar.
Grumpy Byron just hopes it's compatible and asks when will they get there. Anthony says maybe 1 month. Elsewhere on the ship, Mark is having a gender reveal party. It's a boy. Michael wants to know if Mark has picked a name yet and suggests his own.
Mark is only half listening because he's doing his job right now, and he's detected a cluster of radioactive nebula. So this has to be examined, studied, and logged. Eric asks if they have to log every one, and Anthony Thompson tells him yes, they do.
And Eric pouts adorably at this news. Then the computer announces that somebody has fallen and they can't get up. Eric turns on the camera to see that it's Michael. He's sprawled out on the floor.
Eric and Byron and Charlotte rush to the area where Michael has fallen, and they find that he's fallen asleep. They wake him, and he gets up. It's a strange thing that has happened, but he feels fine. And they all laugh it off and return to their duties.
Well, not all of them. One of the crew members looks a little concerned at this. Mark goes to see Stephanie, who apparently fell asleep at her station. Mark wants to know if she's okay, and Stephanie just wants to be left alone.
Then the captain's voiceover explains that as the days continued, they had to rely on automations to control the ship because crewmen couldn't be counted on to stay awake.
They're so tired.
But they couldn't figure out what was causing this problem.
But they realize if nothing changes, the mission will end in disaster.
He also says that it was reported that asteroids kept appearing and disappearing on their monitor.
From this, they can see that they're inside some kind of cloud that sometimes obscures the view of space. This is something they're meant to investigate. Thompson says it's some kind of atomic vapor, and the crew concludes that this is the reason that everyone is so sleepy.
So the captain calls another conference. Charlotte suggests they should send a report back home. There's a small chance they will get a reply and maybe some help. The captain agrees it won't hurt to try, but Byron isn't optimistic about their chances of survival.
And it will also serve as a warning to any future expeditions headed that way. MacDonald tells everyone to cheer up, it's not over yet, and a rocket blasts off. That's all we see is a rocket blasting off. I don't think it even figures into the plot from there. MacDonald worries what will happen if everyone falls asleep. And the computer starts yelling again. Someone has fallen asleep and can't be roused.
Byron shuts off the alert. This is now a common experience and not even worth noting.
Byron chases Michael off with his insistence that anyone who can't stay strong is some kind of coward.
He says he will only acknowledge that this is a disease when it's properly discovered and given a name.
Now alone, Byron looks very fatigued. Anthony starts monologuing, but when the captain asks how long they'll be asleep, he's already out. But Mark says about 60 hours.
The captain wants to know what will happen when they wake up, but there's not really any way to answer that question. Byron won't accept this either. He wants hard facts and data so he can figure out a way to fight this and save the expedition. The captain says there's really nothing that can be done, so Byron says he's going to turn the ship around.
Okay, Dad. In a video booth, Bridget records a final message for her husband, whom she fears she will never see again, and then she collapses on the floor. Byron mumbles to himself about turning the ship around, and then he starts to collapse too. He's almost ready to push the button to turn around when the captain interrupts him. He orders Byron to stand down, but Byron doesn't want to do that. However, the captain begs him not to do it as he's passing out. Ultimately, Byron doesn't take any action because he's asleep now too.
So the ship remains on course through automation, occasionally reporting the status to the sleeping crew.
Poor Merlin the robot just wanders the halls saying, "Anthony, Anthony," until his power runs out.
Eventually, the crew members start to awaken. The captain awakens to hear the ship report that all is well and the ship is on course. Everything seems normal, but Anthony says not quite. He estimated they would sleep for 60 hours, not 19.
Ava and Lawrence reunite, as do Mark and Stephanie. Stephanie seems really upset as they embrace.
In the dining area, Anthony Thompson is trying to figure out how his numbers could have been so far off. He believes something might have intervened and forced the cloud away.
Charlotte just tells him he needs to eat. The ship's doctor thinks that maybe they just adapted to the conditions of whatever was affecting them.
The captain says he was sure this radiation thing would just blow over, and if they had only sent robots on this mission, the ship would have been turned around and headed back by now. So human stubbornness does have its place.
However, his good mood evaporates when Eric Svensson stumbles into the cafeteria covered in radiation sores. Then we cut to the sick bay, where the ship's doctor thinks that the only reason Eric is affected by these is because he spent time outside of the ship just before everything went wrong.
But there were two men outside the ship. Michael was the other one. So now a search is on for Michael.
And Byron is going on foot to find him. Charlotte gloats that the people inside are fine, and Bridget reports that Michael has been spotted. He's on the first level. MacDonald and the others go to get him to bring him to the ship's medical bay, but Michael opens a hatch and throws himself down it.
Byron radios up that they should seal the bottom deck so Michael can't do any more damage.
Or throw himself out an airlock, I think. Down in a sub-level of the ship, Michael destroys his body monitor so he can't be tracked. And he vanishes again. The cameras find him in the aerobic room. The crew fret on how to get to him. Anthony volunteers his robot, which operates via remote control. Merlin the robot goes up to the door where Michael is barricaded behind and starts blowtorching it open.
Michael takes advantage of the hole in the door to shoot Merlin the robot.
He gets him square in the circuit board, and Merlin is dead.
Thompson finds that his support robot has been destroyed.
Aw. Now we're back at the beginning of the movie, where Michael is bellowing that everyone is going to be killed. Byron MacDonald volunteers to collect him, thinking that his is the one voice that Michael will listen to. Before he leaves, he gives his lucky rock to Stephanie. She's going to need it.
Michael is still hiding. Byron puts on a spacesuit to protect him from the radiation and goes down after him.
The doctor and Nina are still trying to save Eric and say that if Michael can be found, they can save him too.
Michael is still hiding. Byron puts on a spacesuit to protect him from the radiation and goes down after him. Byron finds Michael and asks him to listen to him. He tells Michael he can go to the medical bay and be cured, and that they will be successful in reaching the Green Planet, and then they can explore it together. Michael says that there is no Green Planet, and that the mission can end only in death. Byron tells Michael that he's blocking the robot access and he's endangering everyone aboard the ship. Michael says that he wants a cruiser so he can head back home, and tells Byron to go back and relay the message to the captain, but Byron says that he will not leave without him.
Michael threatens to kill him, but ultimately he can't. MacDonald takes Michael to the infirmary, reminding him to apologize to Thompson for destroying his robot.
Then everything happens at once. Michael has made it to the medical bay and he'll be fine. Stephanie has had her baby.
The crew realizes the radioactive cloud is still following them. Bridget's baffled as to what it is. Now Thompson has a new theory. It's not a random cloud, but some kind of tractor beam coming from the Green Planet, which means that it's inhabited. Hooray! Everyone is chuffed. Now they've reached the end of the universe, and it's populated by humans.
What will they find on this new planet? From their viewfinder, they see the New York cityscape and the Statue of Liberty. The Green Planet is our planet!
Wow, they're about to land in 1960s Manhattan. That's the end. Welcome back to the American International Podcast, where we're talking about Voyage to the End of the Universe from 1964.
The budget for the 1963 Czech film Ikari XB1 was 6 million Czech korunas, which would be about $264,795.60 in US dollars today.
I couldn't do the math to translate it back to $1964. Sorry.
The whole film was shot on a single big set except for one air shaft scene, filmed in a 200-meter TV transmission tower near Prague.
In 1964, AIP took the original, Ikari XB1, and edited it, releasing it theatrically in 1964 as Voyage to the End of the Universe. The AIP version also occasionally screened on television in the USA and other countries at various times over the ensuing years, but apart from its screening at Trieste, the original Czech version was rarely seen outside Czechoslovakia until its release on DVD in 2005.
AIP made numerous alterations for the English-language version of the film, which had retitled Voyage to the End of the Universe. 5 to 10 minutes of footage was cut, the names of the cast and staff in the opening credits were anglicized, and the ship's destination was renamed the Green Planet.
However, the biggest change was AIP's recut of the closing scene, which created an entirely different ending from the original. In the Czech version, as the Ikari approaches its destination, its view screens show clouds around the white planet, not the green planet, parting to reveal a densely populated and industrialized planet's surface. For the English version, AIP excised the last few seconds and substituted stock aerial footage of a view of southern Manhattan and the Statue of Liberty.
The American dialogue was recorded at Titra Sound Studios using voice actors like Brett Morrison and Peter Fernandez.
The music played on the piano after the derelict ship explodes is Part 1 Introduction from King David, a.k.a. Leroy David, composed by Arthur Honegger, and performed by the Berlin Symphony Orchestra.
Merlin the Robot in Voyage to the End of the Universe was perhaps the Czech answer to Robbie the Robot in Forbidden Planet. We have seen a similar type of robot in another AIP import, but where the robot John was a major player in Planet Burr or Voyage to the Prehistoric Planet, here the robot does not move or act independently. Anthony has to control him with a remote control.
Now we want to talk about some of the thematic differences that AIP's cut made when it took the original Ikari XB1 and edited it for American audiences. AIP's version downplays the cautionary tale represented by the derelict ship Tornado. In the original, it's an Earth ship from the year 1987. Haha. In AIP's edit, it's from the spaceship crew's own world from about 1,000 years earlier. But one thing they dropped from the original film, there were canisters of a deadly gas named Tigger Fun. It was the, quote, so-called clean weapon from the end of the 20th century, end quote. When the tornado was running low on air, the military men in command used Tigger Fun to kill the others so as to save the remaining air for themselves. When that ran low, they fought and killed each other. That's what the gun was for. In the movie, Eric mutters, vultures, but AIP edited out this clear anti-Western bias for the English dub.
And undercut somewhat in AIP's edit, but still evident, is the subtly delivered dig at the amorality of Western, or non-communist, society by looking at the people aboard the derelict tornado. The dead are dressed in formal wear, symbolic of indulgent capitalist luxury. They died around a gambling table, a symbol of Western decadence, and the crew apparently shot each other, symbolic of aggressive warlike tendencies. The tornado was full of nukes, a Western obsession, and the original version was more blatant about the corruption evident in Western society. There are also a lot more dead card-playing capitalists and soldiers than are shown in the AIP recut.
The order of the astronauts go mad and sleeping sickness sequences may have been reversed in the AIP cut. The original Czech cut also adds more detail to both episodes, as when Bridget can no longer stay awake, she goes to her cabin to record a last testament, but it's not to her husband. It's to be read by future Earth astronauts if they happen to find the Icary as another derelict wreck.
In the original Icary XB-1, the mysterious force that protected the ship's crew from radiation is inferred to have come from the advanced civilization on the White Planet. AIP's re-edit has the Icarus coming from some other planet to Earth, the Green Planet, which did not have advanced technology. The New York City shown in the aerial clips is clearly a vintage 1950s or 60s city, and neither the US nor any other country had been to the moon yet, let alone develop the technology necessary for interstellar travel. AIP would reuse this concept of an alien civilization finding its way to Earth in Maria Bava's Planet of the Vampires.
Icary XB-1 premiered in Czechoslovakia on July 26, 1963. Voyage to the End of the Universe debuted in the United States in the first week of September 1964.
The original Czech version won the main prize at the 1963 Trieste International Science Fiction Film Festival.
Voyage to the End of the Universe debuted as the number 33 rated movie in the country the week that it came out, taking in $26,500, but it dropped off the charts the following week.
AIP's press book suggested that theater owners contact their local Air Force Public Information Office or nearby missile manufacturing plant to borrow space equipment, like missile models or spacesuits to put in the lobby. They also recommended owners set up a planet spotting telescope in front of the theater, but instead of trying to scan the universe, AIP said owners should aim it at a sign promoting the movie, placed atop a nearby building. AIP also told theater owners to sail paper flying saucers with movie passes attached off the marquee into pedestrian traffic on opening day.
Look out! Taglines for Voyage to the End of the Universe include, "Do you dare take the trip into the 25th century?
See life in the centuries to come. Aboard a rocket ship.
Will human emotions change in a world ruled by science?
See life aboard the mighty rocket city as it hurtles through space. See the horrible secret of the rocket ship lost 9 million years. See the mysterious attack from the Black Star."
The press book and the movie didn't really meet each other, did they? Box Office Magazine praised the design of the film, writing that, quote, "This science fiction drama is good enough to sustain interest easily enough for its 81 minutes of space problems. The Spaceship Hospital is a good example of the imagination that went into the makeup of the entire production. Special settings that had to be created for the interior of the ship, as well as the special effects needed to portray meteorites, protective clouds, and other space phenomena, are all to the credit of the technicians, whose efforts are especially appreciated for science fiction buffs."
It has been said that Stanley Kubrick and his visual effects artist Wally Weavers saw Icary XB-1, and that it was one of the films that influenced the look of 2001: A Space Odyssey. Voyage to the End of the Universe may have also influenced Gene Roddenberry, creator of Star Trek.
The Czech Film Archives undertook a digital restoration of the original Czech version. The then newly restored original Czech version was screened as a Cannes Classic at the 2016 Cannes Film Festival.
In 2005, Film Export Home Video released a DVD of the original Czech version of the film with English subtitles and presented it in its original Panavision 2.35:1 anamorphic widescreen aspect ratio. The DVD includes opening credits from the US version and 2 scenes as bonus material to show the differences.
In 2017, a digitally restored version of the movie was released by the Czech Film Archive in Prague on DVD and Blu-ray with Czech, English, and French subtitles.
In 1965, Robert Lippert and Jack Parsons produced an obvious British knockoff of Icary XB-1 called Spaceflight IC-1. This short movie has a carbon copy space voyage plot with a terrible production and a hack script. The ship's captain must put down a feeble mutiny while trying to make one of the women passengers give up her unborn baby for medical reasons.
That's weird. All right, Jeff, we've talked about how everyone else viewed this movie, so let's go over our opinions. What did you think of Voyage to the End of the Universe?
Well, the first thing that strikes me about Voyage to the End of the Universe is that there are a lot of characters in this movie.
There sure are, and they all kind of look alike, the men at least.
And for the most part, who they are and the things they do really don't matter.
No. One thing that confused us a lot is that the credits, even the ones listed in the AIP press book for this movie, have different character names than what the characters themselves say in the dubbed version of the movie. And it's all different from the original Czech version. So we had to scribble out names and rewrite names as we were going through this. The character that we assumed was called Nina was being called Charlotte by the crew members, made us have to go back and change everything. And just figuring out who was extremely difficult.
Right. And the character of Anthony Thompson in the press book is called Anthony Hopkins, which could have been a lot more fun.
I know. I had a whole line set up for that, and then I realized I couldn't even use it.
But they kept referring to Thompson, and it was 3/4 through the movie before you figured out who Thompson was.
Because they're always referring to people by both names, and both names aren't listed anywhere in the credits. Not in the ones on IMDb, not in the ones in the press book. So it was just a matter of deduction for us.
And we're guilty of that too, because we took the name Byron MacDonald, and sometimes he's called Byron, and sometimes he's called MacDonald. Obviously the same guy.
Hopefully you followed along.
But yeah, if you were listening, hopefully you were able to keep up with us.
But that's what the crew did, so that's why we did it too. However, I enjoyed this movie. It was quite a change from the last Eastern Bloc space movie recut that we saw, the Voyage to the Prehistoric Planet.
Right. I think that film was made before Icarus XB1, but the Roger Corman and AIP recut would be done a few years after Voyage to the End of the Universe.
And that was done for television too, wasn't it? Or did that get theatrical release?
That was a television-only release.
Right. And this had theatrical release.
But that was the one that had footage from other films. Queen of Blood had a theatrical release.
And that was Russian, and this was Czechoslovakian. So they're not made by the same country. They don't have the same resources to make movies in Czechoslovakia that they would have had in Russia. So it was a little more bare bones. I think the ship was cool, and I think the movie overall was better than Voyage to the Prehistoric Planet. But what went into making the planet Venus come alive, they didn't really have that kind of magic here.
No, we don't really see the planet until the very end, and that's stuff that AIP added in, and it's just stock footage anyway.
Right.
Another thing about this movie is that for most of its running time, Voyage to the End of the Universe doesn't really seem to have much of a plot.
No, it's just a bunch of vignettes where things are happening that allow you to see that time is passing.
And it gives them the chance to build some characterization for the characters that do matter.
And we do need that because something bad happens to at least 4 of them, and we need to care about them.
And using those vignettes to show the passage of time, it really does give off the feeling of what it might be like to travel to the end of the universe.
The way we watched the movie yesterday, taking notes, it really felt like an extended space voyage being trapped in this movie for a while. Fortunately, I didn't mind. Got a little claustrophobic there.
This journey would likely have taken a few years, but it's actually only a few months since a baby that was conceived a month before the ship liftoff is birthed at the end of the film. But that's also assuming that the people on board the ship have biology comparable to ours.
Right. They could have 18-month pregnancies for all we know.
Yeah, we're not supposed to think about it that hard.
They do claim to be human beings, so.
But I think the big thing that we see is the effects of this voyage, and the enthusiasm for the people on board just dwindles over time. At the beginning, everybody's gung-ho and excited. They're going to the gym every day. Mm-hmm. And by the end, they're just kind of doing their jobs and sleeping. And that's pretty much it. Even when they're able to stay awake, they're sleeping on their off time.
Well, that makes them more human to me, because that's how we all are. Really excited to get that new job. And eventually it's like, oh, I got to go to work again. Got to sit next to Bob, and can't stand him. That's not true on my job, but it's a human condition. In researching this movie and seeing the cuts that AIP made and what might have been the reason behind them in order to block some of the communist propaganda maybe that the original contained, that kind of made me think that, wow, I mean, I was alive during the Cold War, but it didn't really affect me any, and I didn't think about it, especially as a child. But knowing that it was a big deal in the 1960s, that they would have to cut out these digs at Western society, I thought that was kind of an interesting choice they made.
What about the choice to throw in that ending that it's Earth?
Well, it just seems like they had to M. Night Shyamalan this movie for some reason. It was before Planet of the Apes. You know, they're on Earth all along. So I guess they kind of wanted that super surprise twist. They thought it maybe needed that to keep interest, keep people coming back. I
would have been surprised by that when they're calling it the Green Planet the whole time. I mean, I don't know if I probably knew what the ending was before I saw this. I don't remember. It's only been a week, but it didn't come off as a surprise when I saw it. Maybe it's because I had fairly recently watched Planet of the Vampires, where AIP pulls the same trick. Spoilers to a movie we haven't looked at yet that's almost 60 years old.
Plus, we've seen Planet of the Apes, and in 1964, that wouldn't have been the case. Nobody would have seen Planet of the Vampires. Nobody would have seen Planet of the Apes. So they would have been coming in cold. They didn't have the internet to tease any kind of super secret twist at the end. Audiences would have been coming in cold, and I think it would have surprised them. So
do you think that by the time Planet of the Vampires would come out a year later, that would have had the same surprise? I think it's pulled off better in that film.
Oh, yeah, definitely, because it's a completely alien civilization where these people claim to be human beings, and we expect that they're Earthling, at least Earth types.
And we talked about how this movie was a possible influence for Stanley Kubrick for 2001 and
just for the visual design.
And likely Star Trek. Yeah.
I was thinking of Star Trek when I watched this movie, not knowing that it could possibly have influenced Gene Roddenberry. It just made me think, wow, this is the Star Trek before Star Trek.
It did have that feeling.
A co-ed crew, multi-ethnicity. I mean, everyone's white, but they're from different countries at least. And just a living, working situation. It's not people strapped into tiny modules. They're walking around. They're going to the gym. They're living their lives. And it felt very much like Star Trek turned out to be.
And the look of the ship, I could see that having an influence on 2001 with these long corridors.
Mm-hmm.
And the Icarus is a pretty roomy ship. There seems to be a lot of unused available space on board. Maybe not as much as the ship that we would see in Planet of the Vampires, which looks like it's an open studio for the most part.
Right.
Talk about a waste of space. I did think the third act started to drag a little bit.
Well, I think maybe that was by design, because for them it was dragging a lot. They never seemed to get any closer. All this time's passing, nothing's happening. And then finally, everything starts happening in the last minute and a half of the movie.
I thought maybe it's because we'd already seen the crew in pursuit of Michael as he's running mad throughout the ship at the beginning of the film. And so it was like a repeat.
Well, that's how flashbacks work, though.
Oh, I understand that.
I know you understand that.
But once they bring him back up, everything just happens really quickly and then the movie's suddenly over.
Do you think they maybe shouldn't have done it in flashback? I mean, I think it adds to the suspense, but it's, I don't know. Was it a tired device in 1964? It definitely is now.
I don't know that it was all that effective as a flashback because I had forgotten that stuff happened at the beginning of the movie because I didn't know any of these people were yet.
Right.
And when I watched it the second time to take notes, I was seeing stuff that I remembered from the end of the film, but I'm like, I don't remember this from the beginning of the movie.
Oh, I did. I thought it was a good teaser because it doesn't go on that long. It gives you that sense that something really bad is going to happen. So then when they go back to the flashback, and everything seems more idyllic at the beginning, then you know that something bad is about to happen. But the way they told the story, it didn't really track like everything's fine and we're on this mission. It was just like a series of getting to know the character scenes. So I don't know that the story kept up with that compelling beginning until it caught up with itself again.
Yeah, because the first time I watched that, I don't think I realized that it was a flashback until it looped around again. But like I said, I didn't even remember seeing that stuff before the second time that it came through. Because
when the captain starts flashing back, it didn't go doodaloo, doodaloo, doodaloo with the screen kind of shimmying into the flashback mode. It didn't do that. So you just had to be able to figure it out for yourself.
Yeah, I guess I wasn't smart enough to figure that out.
Well, I wasn't either at first. And then I realized, oh, wait, they must be talking about how the whole thing started because there is no signal that the captain is flashing back. He just starts monologuing. He could have just been talking to himself while everything is happening, but it turns out that no, he's thinking about how it all began.
Right, and how it all begins, we're not really there from the beginning. We don't know the name of the ship. We don't know any of the characters. He's just talking about this ship going off, and I didn't realize that this was the beginning of that mission that had already happened, or this was starting now. I didn't get the time frame the first time through.
I agree that it was confusing. I think the reason I like it is just because it interested me, because it was an interesting concept. as a successful movie, I don't think that it qualifies as that, unfortunately. But I like the characters and I like the concept. I don't like the ending, though. It just seems cheap and gimmicky to me.
It does, but I don't know if the original ending would have been any better, except at least they're not trying to pull the rug out from under you.
Right.
It was just like, okay, we're at the White Planet, ho-hum.
Well, I wonder what would have happened if the movie actually had them landing and trying to assimilate into the White Planet culture. There could have been a lot of drama there. So maybe if the movie wasn't quite so about the entire voyage, but getting to the destination and seeing what happens there.
But it's not the destination at the end of the universe. It's the voyage to the end of the universe. So that's not what the movie's supposed to be about.
That really begs the question that could Earth actually be the end of the universe? Are we at the tail end of everything here on this planet?
Well, from our perspective, we're at the starting end of the universe.
That's just human arrogance. So let's sum up our final thoughts with that final grade. How would you rate Voyage to the End of the Universe using our AIP scale, where A is awesome, I is intermediate, and P is pathetic?
Well, I was kind of surprised to find that Voyage to the End of the Universe is actually a pretty solid piece of sci-fi. And there's not really a whole lot of science fiction within the story, except for the basis of the story, if that makes sense. They're going through space, but these are people just doing their jobs every day. And I thought it was an interesting approach and kind of Star Trek-y, but I really enjoyed this film, and I'm going to give this one an A. I thought it was awesome.
Wow, I'm surprised.
What are your thoughts?
Well, when you call it Star Trek-y, you have to remember there was no such thing yet. And so I thought it was pretty innovative. And I think that this and Voyage to the Prehistoric Planet, which was really called Planeta Burr, showed that the Eastern Bloc countries were really pretty innovative when coming up with these concepts. And this movie, Voyage to the Prehistoric Planet, and also the Finnish movie, Sampo, which became The Day the Earth Froze, I think that we really lose out getting the AIP cuts of these movies because the originals are so much better looking. They're so much better formatted. They sound better. The voiceovers, if you get the dubbed version, the plot makes a lot more sense. So I think we've really lost out by getting this version of the movie as opposed to getting to watch the original with subtitles. So I would give the original a definite A, but I want to give the AIP cut an I because I think they kind of messed up the movie some. They didn't ruin it entirely. It's still a good movie. I absolutely recommend watching it if you can find it. But I think that the gimmicky ending and just the changes they made that kind of took away from the movie's original intent, which admittedly was to slam Western culture, was kind of a cheat. And I don't agree with that. So I would definitely love to see the original. I bet I would give that movie an A, but I'm going to give this version of the movie an I, just because I think AIP blundered through it. I hate the way that they Americanized the names, even though for us it made it a lot easier to tell you who's in this movie. But it's all a lie. Those aren't the names of anybody. Not the names of the characters, not the names of the actors, the crew, all made up. So, like I said, AIP's version, I, original, A. But for the purposes of this podcast, I got to stick with I.
Well, we see that a lot with AIP and their recutting of foreign films, or even domestic films in this case of The Wild Party, which we looked at recently.
Oh, right. Yeah, they absolutely butchered that one. Was it for the better? No. They think they know better, but, you got to trust your filmmakers. They have a vision, and the studio is just messing with that. All right, I think that concludes this voyage to the end of the universe. But before we disembark this podcast, I need to say that you've been listening to the American International Podcast. I'm Cheryl Lightfoot.
And I'm Jeff Markin.
And we'll meet you at the drive-in.
Follow the American International Podcast on Instagram and Letterboxd at AIP_pod and on Facebook at facebook.com/American International Podcast.
The American International Podcast is produced and edited by Jeff Markin.
A man whose mind is distorted by hatred.
And Cheryl Lightfoot.
A girl hungry for too many things.
The American International Podcast is part of the Pop Culture Entertainment Network.